Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, David Carr, founder of Steward, Business, where we bring great leaders, speakers to you every week here on the podcast. And this week we've got a pair of co-founders I'm excited to have you learn from about how we can get clear information, understanding of what's going into our organizations, what's actually happening, what's the real truth here. I think a lot of leaders don't solve the right problems because they don't have the right information or it's incomplete. And so I'm really excited to have the co-founders of WattNext AI here and also of ViVo Pulse. We're going to get into those tools in a little bit here about the groundbreaking work they're doing in organizational diagnostics, just basically what's going on, what's the heartbeat of your organization and getting clear on that. Polly Watt, Mike Voss, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Polly, you and I first met through Success Champions Network, SCN, and I've had a number of guests on the podcast, which is great because I really appreciate the synergy there. And when we met earlier this year, the tool you showed me, this ViVo Pulse and what you've been creating is fantastic. We're going to unpack that. But before we do, I would like you, and then Mike, I'm going to have follow up with you. Share a little bit about your journey, Polly, because I know you've worked with, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Salesforce. You've worked with a lot of different big companies, global learning and development spaces, but you saw a problem here. And I think, bringing something to the market to help address that. But talk a little about your personal journey and why did you co-found WattNext with Mike?
Okay, so my journey was very much in L&D and in education, and I had left a job with an NGO, kind of a scale-up company, and I've worked in quite a lot of scale-up companies in my time, and they do have a tendency to be a bit of a shambles. So when I'd left that role, I was thinking that I was going to pivot again. So I was senior learning expert in that organization, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to set up a consultancy. And as I was doing that, and I got quite a long way. I had my idea, I had my plan. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to concentrate on scale-up organizations, and I'm going to help them sort out their systems, processes, leadership, and knowledge management, because those are the kind of big four messes in those size organizations. And then I met Mike, and at the same time, I started an agentic AI course. And by the third week of the course, I had created the tool that we're now using and that we have now kind of become, which is called ViVo Pulse. And that is using agentic AI to interview people. So as a consultant, a lot of your time is spent interviewing people. And it takes a long time. So we can do 60 people an hour in interviews as opposed to 8 in the day. So that, that's the kind of sort of starting difference that we have. And then I'll let Mike take over and tell you about his.
Absolutely, Mike. Yeah, Mike, you're co-founder. You've been a global executive strategist. You've been product market leader. You're doing just a lot of different things, and you work with big firms as well. Talk a little bit about maybe even how you met Polly, and then when you guys created this, because obviously you guys did this synergy, you found each other, and then boom, here we go.
Sure. So I've spent must be close to 20 years now as a consultant in various capacities, pretty much self-employed. And anyone who's done that for a while and been successful at it knows that it's really about doing more than what you're asked to do. It's about being, creating value, being indispensable. So for me, that's one of the things that I've always kind of loved, and I've worked very hard at doing is getting a grasp of the bigger picture so that I can add value that extends beyond the tasks that are given to me. Working with a huge organization through to on a more fractional basis, working with some of the smaller ones and the startups, I just saw some of the same fundamental dysfunction issues happening, irrespective of how mature the company is, how big the company is, how little the company is. And so there's definitely some fundamental things that apply to almost everybody. As Polly said, there's a lot of dysfunction. It doesn't matter who you are, it's everywhere. And it's one of those things that is very difficult to solve because it takes time out from doing the work. And often, especially in today's environment, there's a lot of pressure to produce results. So you're trying to focus on doing that. And underneath you've got things that are inefficient and dysfunctional, and you just never get there. And then on the other hand, as a self-employed person, you're always looking for ways to earn as much as you can, but what you're selling is your time. Well, how do I create more opportunity for myself when I can only do so much? And so that got me sort of thinking about, what are the models that we can do to, almost clone ourselves or do things in a better way, so that we're not forced to spend much time doing things like interviews and doing things like, and then you got the perfect storm of AI coming in and just what it can do that's never been possible before in the same way. The technology is fantastic. It can do things today and tomorrow probably that we haven't even thought of yet. And then, Polly and I connected just through, I think, organic networking as one does.
Yeah.
And, we started talking to each other, and, there was a lot of sort of synergy. I think we kind of got each other and what we were trying to do. And even more so than solving a business problem, it was the passion for really making a difference. It's mission as well. It's like work should be enjoyable. Work shouldn't be something that sucks the life out of you. Work should be something where you put in some effort and you actually get some success, and that leads to happiness, enjoyment, and it's so hard to find. And we saw so many companies just struggling to stay above water and losing their passion for what they were doing. And we thought, we can solve this. We know some fundamental principles that apply to just about everyone. And if we can provide that to them in a structured way and in a prioritized way, depending on who and where they are, I think we've got something really special. And that's kind of how we started.
That's fantastic, Mike. Well, and my company, Steward Your Business, is all about how we take care of our people, and using a tool like this, where we're going to unpack it, is like gets us further down the line quicker, helping us solve the real issues. And so I'm excited for you guys that you've come up with this and worked together. And I'm on mission with you. I want to help other people too. And that's why I have you on the podcast. The whole purpose of the Business Roundtable podcast is to bring folks like you here, so that our listeners here are like, oh, there's an advocate. There's somebody that really wants to help me succeed. And for those of you that want to connect with Mike and Polly, we're going to make sure all the show notes has that in there. We're also connected on LinkedIn there too. So I want to make sure that you guys reach out to them. We'll have all that in the show notes. But I'd love to break it down, because this idea of this ViVo Pulse, if you will, and Polly, I'm going to come back to you, but this idea of how do we do these interviews? How do we get this information and get it reliably too? Because I think that's one of the things you guys led with, is like, I know a lot of executives, well, I asked my team, there's no problem. They told me there's no problems. There's no issues. I mean, it was how many times that we heard that? Like, well, of course they're not going to, I mean, they also have their own, biases and things there. So Polly, walk us through a little bit about what, this tool and what you've created now, in a way of, like you said, going from 8 interviews in a day to maybe 60, I mean, that's quite a big.
So hundreds a day. But basically, in the current situation you have, so in companies that you have different ways of gathering information, they may be questionnaires that are deeply flawed. The problem with the questionnaire is it takes your time, it's boring, everyone knows who wrote which questionnaire, like who wrote this. And when you say, I hate my boss, you get fired. So there's that, that is an issue, and it's something to be avoided if possible. And if you do person-to-person interviews, they take a lot of time. They take up, seriously about an hour. And then you don't know until you've interviewed quite a lot of people that actually John is an issue. Like you've missed that in your initial interviews, because it takes you a while to realize that the same person is coming up again and again and again as an issue, as a blocker. So that is one issue. And also then interviewers have bias. And, people just want to get the task done as quickly as possible. So with the voice, so we use a voice agent. So it's asking you questions. It has a set list of questions depending on your role in the company. But they are different sides of the same question, if that makes sense. So if you were asking about strategic alignment, like, do you know what the company stands for? That might, imagine the senior leaders do really know what it stands for, but is that filtering down to the bottom layers? And do the managers tie that into the work that you're doing as an employee? Do you understand strategic value that your work is bringing to the company, etc. So those are the things that we look at. And by using the voice AI, you get 3 to 4 times more data. So it's a much richer environment than for example, a questionnaire. And then it's something that we would say do anywhere. So do it while you're commuting, do it while you're walking the dog, while you're doing the washing up, while you're doing the ironing, because then you're not weighing your words in quite the same way.
Oh yeah,
so if you're not weighing your words, then you're saying really like John is god awful, and like really terrible. He has to, like he's making my life hell. Whereas if you're going, if you're writing that down, you're not writing that. You're not really saying what you think. You're sanitizing everything, or you're just not saying anything because it's easier to say nothing than regret it later. I don't know if anyone else has spent 3 hours, like redoing the same questionnaire because you're like,
well, I don't say that.
I'm going to get fired. Then it's like, how to do it so that it's not going to get me fired, but I am getting the message across. And it is incredibly difficult. And generally one gives up before you get to that point of saying what needs to be said. And so generally speaking, the most effective interview is the exit interview, which is a little bit late. So we can do these interviews and then we take that data from those interviews. And the reason that we get good results and honest results is we anonymize the data. But not only do we anonymize the data, we aggregate it. So in a larger company, you might have different sales teams. And so you might do the data for all the employees in Denver in the sales team. There might be 100 people in the sales team. There might be 20. And you can break it down and then so you then anonymize it. So you get one result of all the employees in the sales department in Denver as one number. So you're not getting, John said this, Jane said that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about
Sam
that.
said something else. I know it was them because I saw the data coming in.
Yes, right.
Yeah, so I know I sent it out that time. I sent a reminder and it came back in like 10 minutes later. So I know it's that group of people or whatever. So we can break it down to quite small teams, but not too small because we require a certain number for it to be anonymous.
Yes.
So we won't break it down beyond a certain point. So if you only got 2 salespeople, we're not going to tell you that one. What you were like, I can figure that out. Yeah. 2 out of 2 people said John's a pain in the bum. So we're not going to take it down to that level. Right. And so our main aim is to really protect the anonymity of people. And so what we do, I think Mike could talk about the kind of safety level that we put in. So this is how we map the data. So we map it to 13 kind of key dimensions. I'm looking at them now, so I'll read them out. Sort of strategic alignment, trust and integrity, organizational culture, vision and strategic direction, decision-making quality, cross-team collaboration, role clarity and accountability, support for teams, resource availability, process robustness, knowledge management, operational resilience, and leadership pipeline. And there are other elements that we have kind of cached inside that. So, for example, feedback from clients is cached into sort of different areas. And within each of those elements, those 13 dimensions, we break them down further into between 9 and 14 extra kind of data points. And we're mapping those conversations to those data points. And with that information, we produce a report on each of those 13 dimensions saying what's working, what's not. And then we give you a plan, a really concrete plan, what you can put in place in the next 30 days to get buy-in. So those are the easy changes, the quick fixes that you can get buy-in. And it means that you're not, what normally happens is you have this huge time delay between starting to ask people questions and then suggesting what needs to change. And we have condensed that down to 10 days, depending on the size of the organization, maybe a bit longer, but really in days, you have a plan that you're working through. And that, I think, is a huge differentiator between what we can do in the time using the tools that we use in comparison to sort of traditional consulting, or, for HR, even this is this would replace an engagement survey or a pulse survey. And it would, again, takes away those pain points of having to go organize it individually for each person to do it. It's like you give us a list and we give you a plan.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I love that, and I know one of the things I really appreciate both of you being on here too, as you're working with coaches and consultants like myself, and then we can look at that data and say, okay, where do we feel like we can best, if it's a good fit, like let's look at that and be honest and real, like, can I bring real value and seeing these are your pain points. Because I infuse coaching and consulting, so I've been a project manager another one. So I'm like, okay, where is it? Is it in your project delivery? Like you said, maybe it's your client feedback. Where are we having breakdowns in the group? Is it there's between the sales and the production team or whatever the case might be? And so now we have a clear roadmap. You've identified these issues, is what I hear you saying, Paula. You've got a very systematic way of going through all these different categories, and then creating that map, if you will. You mentioned safety, and maybe Michael, I come to you because I think there's always, I don't always, but many times people are like, you mentioned being anonymous, but is there anything else that you're doing just to create this kind of psychological safety or ways of like coming in and doing this and making sure like, okay, this is not going to be weaponized against me. I feel like I can be honest and real. Maybe Mike, you can take that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question. I mean, we do anonymize everything, so we don't provide any identifiable information to the company. Mm-hmm. But I think it goes even beyond that, and what we do, looking at it maybe slightly differently, is I think one of the big issues with traditional means of doing this kind of thing is that there's very little trust in the organization, and that's usually as a result of people will say something to their company or their employer, and it like goes into a black hole. It never comes up. So and so they feel like they're not being heard. They feel like they're not being noticed. They feel like they're not being recognized. And now what we're doing is we're actually providing actionable recommendations based on the feedback. And so that in itself engenders more trust. Mm-hmm. So that's just something that's there. And then one of the other things that we have, and it's a slightly different spin on it, but we, and I think it's another competitive differentiator for us, is that we have a specific agent that checks for mental health issues.
Interesting.
So we heard a story of a company. I think somebody in the organization was self-harming, and I think it took something like 3 months or 12 weeks, something like that, for them to actually pick this up. Mm-hmm. So one of the very first things we do is we analyze based on industry leading frameworks and practices and best practices. We have an agent that checks for indications that could indicate that there would be some kind of an issue there, and that's flagged to us immediately before anything else. So that's something that we've done. The other thing that we do is we track those perception gaps. So if your employees, or at least if your senior leaders, because it's normally this way around, are saying, well, our knowledge management is fantastic. We make sure everybody has access to everything they need. And the employees are saying, we don't know how to do anything. We can't find it. We don't know where it is. We'll pick that up. So great. We look for outliers, but we track everything. And it's probably a good time to mention too here how this works, because I think one of the things, AI is a buzzword right now. Everybody's all about AI. It can do everything. And it can do a lot, but it's very difficult to get it to do what you want. And I think it's important to distinguish between what we're doing here and between someone having a chat with an LLM, like GPT or Gemini. It's not that. Yes, we do leverage the AI, but there are very specific guardrails and frameworks that we have built in. We've taken our combined decades of experience. We've taken, proven frameworks that exist. We've taken, best practices from the industry, and we've built that into a knowledge base. So it's not that we're throwing a question into a large language model and saying, hey, tell us what the answer is. It's saying, we have a pretty good idea of if they're saying something like this, it's indicating this. And so we're interrogating that. And we have done a ton of work on exactly what you mentioned right in the beginning, predictability and reliability, because that's important.
Yes, absolutely.
This thing needs to be that. And that's incredibly difficult to do with AI. I don't say we've cracked it completely, but I think we've done a pretty good job in that we do get some good results, and that's definitely things that make this kind of different. Some of the other things that we pick up are what we call hidden heroes, and I don't know what the opposite of that is. Blockers. I think we call them blockers.
People blockers.
Yeah.
So there's a bad use.
Yeah. So if people are consistently saying, well, John really helps me with this, and it occurs a certain number of times or a certain number of frequency, we'll pick that up, and we will identify that as a person of value within the organization. And likewise, if somebody says, so and so is doing something that's not great, whether they're making work harder on a purely sort of work-based side, or if there's bullying going on, for example, we'll pick things like that up too. So it's so much more than what you would get from something like an engagement survey. In that, Trisha, yeah,
I love that. I love that it's picking that up, Mike. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because you brought this up about the AI, and I think I was just reading an article this week about AI. So this is more just like you said, using a chat feature, and they're saying that AI is your yes man. They're just saying yes. They're affirming you on everything. And so what I hear you saying, just to clarify, is that you guys have a closed system. You've got this information so that you're having a database and you're looking, and it's not getting influenced out externally and trying to like muddy the data, right? Is that the way? I'm just want to clarify our audience.
We use, so the question part of it, so the bit that's you're talking to, is asking you really open questions. So it's not kind of, and if it's not getting the data it needs, it knows enough that it needs to ask a follow-up question. But it's not, the idea is not that it's like, oh, whatever. And it's not kind of massaging your ego in the process. It's not saying, oh, aren't you marvelous? Which is, of course, really lovely, but not very useful for us.
Yes, right.
And then what we have the other end is we use different LLM models to verify the output. So we would give a transcript, we give a numerical, it marks itself, it gives it a numerical value, and it has to justify each numerical value. It gives it like, I'm giving it this mark because this person said that. And then it's re-verified by a different second model to make sure that those things line up and it agrees. It's working off a framework of options that it can give. And it's fairly complicated, but not hugely complicated.
Yes.
And they're surprisingly good at picking up sort of emotion. And so we get some kind of emotional feedback. I mean, that will get better as time goes on. And our model will probably, evolve as we go, but that's where we are now. And it's interesting. And then, of course, we verify everything at the end. So not just at the end, but like all the way through. So if it's throwing, like, if it's saying like this is not computing, it's alerting us that this is not computing, and we go and we have a look. And
I'm so glad to hear that you do that. I remember doing a DISC assessment years ago with a colleague, and we all did it. We sat in the room, they did the assessment, and then they came back and they're like, the person answered it in the way that they wanted to be, but not who they really were.
Yeah.
And like I said, what I'm hearing you saying, Polly, if you keep doing this, eventually you're like, there's a disconnect here. It's going to pick up a disconnect in somebody's trying to answer this a certain way. And you're like, I'm not seeing a consistency here.
And also because it aggregates all that data at the end. So you get all the interviews from everybody and they're aggregated in the same department, for example. And if one person is saying, famous John is fantastic, and everyone else is saying John is really not fantastic at all, then it'll be flagged as the kind of outlier. So it will not, the one John lover is not really going to change the output very much. And we verify everything to make sure that at the end it all makes sense, like the numbers that are coming out and the words that are coming out mean the same
well
thing.
I think that's very valuable, Polly, because on the flip side, I've had it too, where you have a supervisor or leader that's gotten very high marks, but one particular person just did not, they had a bad experience. They had something, and it was more of a personal vendetta, or if you will, like, I'm going to get this person, and it will, again, same thing. It'll come out. Sounds like it'll come out in the wash as to, wait a minute. Because I think, at least in my experience, I'd love to get sometimes when leaders look at these before this surveys, they would weight certain voices more than another. Well, this person's perspective, I'm going to give them more weight than another, and unfairly, I believe, well, they have a position in the company, then their voice. Yeah. Right. That's just something I've seen. What have with working with clients so far? What has surprised your clients the most once you guys started doing this with them? What have they said to you that was like, oh man, I didn't even realize.
I have a terminology for this, but I won't use it. But anyway, so friends of the boss kind of issues. So it's like, no, you've misunderstood this guy. Like, no, he's fantastic. The boss thinks he's fantastic, and everyone else is saying, no, really not fantastic. And when you get the results and it says 25 people said John is not fantastic, John is causing problems, he's a micromanager, he's and it says why John is a problem, right? So it depends who gets this report. So we do different versions of the report, just to clarify this, because obviously this would be complicated potentially. But say, David, we're going in as a white label product for you. We would give you the report, right? So you would know that John was not great news. You could then decide if John is the person that's hired you, you might not want to give it to John. You might want to break that news to John a bit differently than the report saying 25 people or 50% of your company hate you. You might not want to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
You might want to say, John, I really think you'd benefit from some leadership training.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there are people in a company that you probably can't get rid of, and you need to work out, coach them or or silo them or whatever it is that you need to do to make that continue. And then so that gives you the power to know exactly who the great people are. So we have these kind of hidden heroes, and then we have these people blockers. And so the hidden heroes you've got to keep. They're the people that hold your whole company together. And then the people blockers, it's undeniable. You see how many times they've come up as a people blocker, and you can't get away from it. You can't ignore them. But you get that power to kind of work out how you're going to break that news.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads into something else that I'm certainly passionate about, in that I don't believe AI should replace people, at least not. Well, yes, shouldn't replace people. There are certain functions and roles it can, but people are at the heart of an organization, and that's so important. And it's even what we're trying to do with how we use AI. It's just to augment and enhance what we can do. It's not to replace what we can do. And you have all these trends. You have hybrid workforces with remote and on-site. You have hybrid AI employee versus real employee. Those kind of things are happening right now. And to have a tool that can tell you how to, change your organization to make the work that your people do better, that's cool, because it's not going to say, oh no, AI is going to just change everything. It's going to say, here's what you need to do for everybody to perform better.
Yeah,
we would never say, all right, you should sack all your lower workforce.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you clarifying that. We've had a number of folks on the podcast talking about that. In fact, I was recording an episode yesterday. It does replace, you said, very menial, mundane tasks that can be done better. But I think I agree with you both, and that's why we have on the podcast. So like, how do we upskill our team? How do we help people become better? Because at the end of the day, we want, like I said, these relationships, and I appreciate you guys clarifying that, because sometimes people, I think, are threatened, and there's like this fear out there, like AI is going to take over, and it's like, well, like you said, it's a tool, it's a resource, and then we can make decisions on actual truth and facts versus, I think this, I wonder that, and by the way, you guys, your ViVo report, there's one on your website that I downloaded a PDF, which is really great. It goes and breaks down all of this, which is very extensive. But I love to be able to see that. And even you guys have that friction calculator on your website too, which I thought is a great tool of like seeing what does it cost you, giving you just to think through some of these things in these different key areas that you identified, probably. Because I think a lot of folks don't think about that, and what is it actually costing them, and why this is so important, the information you're bringing.
And I think it's an American issue. So at the end of the financial year, you might lay off a portion of your workforce because it looks better on the balance books, on the books. So that costs you a fortune. Recruiting people, it's like the most expensive thing your company does is recruitment. So just make that better, right? Just don't do that. Do a better job. And when you see the actual cost, so like you say, the friction calculator, so that is a tool that we would recommend anyone use. So if you're trying to persuade a company to employ you because you know that you can help them with these issues, use that, because it actually puts a figure on how much it's costing them to not deal with these things.
Yes.
So, and the cost is huge. I mean, literally, it's probably one of the biggest lines on your balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
so sort it out.
Yeah.
I love thing, you guys just put it on the website. It's easy to use. Gives you a real, because I mean, at the end of the day, when I talk to business owners, it's like, how do I either make money or save money? Really, what does that look like for me, right? And
well, the nice thing too here is that it gives you so HR, for example, you're always under pressure to prove that the work you're doing is meaningful and making a difference to the bottom line, and it's very difficult for HR traditionally. But now you can go to the boardroom with actual numbers and say, hey, this is what it's costing us to do this. And you can come to them with an actionable plan. And the other thing that we can do, because we can run it in 10 days or whatever, you can run it once, you can implement some of these changes. In 6 months, you can run it again, and you can measure the difference. You can see if you've managed to move the needle, which is fantastic for somebody who goes in and does this kind of work with an organization.
Absolutely. I love that, Mike, because we want to know that we're making progress. Like, were you more profitable? Did you have less turnover? These different issues. So that was one of my questions to ask you is like, how often should we do this query of our people?
I would say every 6 months, and then you have a new plan for the next 6 months, so you can keep on implementing changes and improving what's happening in your company. And obviously it depends on the company who they want to bring in to do those changes. So it might be that they have HR and they have L&D and they believe that they can put in those changes themselves, and that might well be the case. They might need a bit of help. They might need consultants. We can help them match with consultants that suit where they are and who they are, etc. And then so we can either come in with a consultant, or we can recommend in a consultant, but we no longer do the consultancy ourselves.
Well, that's why I love having you on here, because you're helping folks like myself, Steward Your Business, help bring this to clients, to help them get really concrete numbers and information, and to make, again, decisions. And I agree with you. I like that 6 months. I figure if you went too long, I think a year would be too long, because you might have a little more drift. People come, people go, and then to say like, okay, where are we? And from my perspective, I want to provide value just like you do, and I want to say like, I want to be able to say like, where are we? What's the progress we've made? And we can actually see this, do this survey. Is there a certain, just for as folks that are listening into this, is there a certain size of a company or that you would say that this fits better for, or doesn't really matter? Does it matter? Because we talk to a lot of people on our podcast, but I want to just be clear, because so people are like, oh, I'm not sure if this would apply to me or my industry or whatnot. But speak to that, like, how this is applicable or not to other industries or markets, if you will.
So the limit, we don't go under 25 people, because we need that many people for us to be able to assure anonymity. In terms of sectors, we are sector agnostic with a couple of exceptions. So that would be the construction industry, because those tend to not be employees of the company. I would say places like universities, where you do not have that employee manager senior leader structure. I mean, it would depend on the institution. There might be institutions where that would work better than others. So if it's overly flat, I guess the structure might be an issue. I would say there are surprising uses for this that we hadn't imagined that when we started. Things like mergers and acquisitions, find it a useful tool, because I can see that. They can see where things are working and where things aren't, particularly, and that it's very difficult to get people to break out of their original unit into the wider unit. So that's an interesting one to look at.
Yes, very much.
So it's been an interesting journey seeing where people find use in it. In fact.
I got a follow-up question that because that totally makes sense for mergers and acquisitions. I was just talking to a banker this week. I'm just spitballing here with you guys, but I'm just thinking if I'm going to loan money to people for their company, what like when people are going to get insurance, right? Cybersecurity insurance. Like, what are you doing with your people to make sure that they're educated, aware, right? Because your insurance will go down if you can show that you're being proactive. I'm just thinking out loud. This to me seems like a great tool. If you could demonstrate to the marketplace how we're doing these things and we're going to get a return on our investment,
I think so. I think it's any kind of due diligence. Any company that needs to do due diligence should be thinking along these lines, because if you're investing in any kind of company, so that might be private equity, that might be VC, that might be a bank, you might want to know what that looks like on the other side. Do they actually have legs, or is it all front? I think we all know, like, we've all done pitches and we've all presented ourselves as kind of the miracle solution to whatever the problem is.
Right.
And it's difficult to know necessarily what that might look like under the hood.
Yeah, and I think, as I said before, the technology has enabled us to do this for a fraction of the cost of what you would traditionally have to spend to be able to achieve anything close, even remotely close. So, I mean, it's almost a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, I agree. I mean, that's why we're having you here. You're both here. I mean, this has been a great conversation. I know we're getting into the podcast, but I feel like, knowing that, hey, if you're 25 people or 1,000 people, whatever that is in your company, like, get this organizational truth, find out today. And like you said, and really in a matter of 10 days, 2 weeks, you're going to have some great information to make a plan. Especially, we're recording this in the end of November. This is probably going to come out in early 2026. But nonetheless, wherever you're at in your journey, like, listening into this, wherever you hear this, it's like you said, Mike, why wouldn't you want to just get the information so you can make an informed decision instead of spinning your wheels? And if we just think about, like, the cost, like you said, of recruiting one person, the cost of whatever it is, hiring somebody is thousands of dollars just to get them up to speed. And if they leave your company, that's just one person. Like, what if you have 10, 20 people? And I've had this where companies have bad managers or things, and people, it's like a domino, like, people just keep falling like flies. They're like, boom, I'm out of here. I'm like, oh, now our whole department's decimated. Well, that's very expensive. Very expensive.
And if your knowledge management processes weren't up to scratch, then all of that leaves with them. Yeah.
Exactly. So that is a huge problem, is how your systems and processes work. If they're not documented along with the knowledge management properly, then every time someone leaves, they're just leaving with, everyone has to start again because there's nothing left.
Right. Well,
if you leave under bad terms, you are not leaving them presents. You are taking everything. Unless you're escorted out of the building in the next 10 minutes, you are not. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I so appreciate you both coming on here, helping us break it down. Obviously, friction and these issues we're having, these challenges in organization can be solved, which I'm excited because you guys want to help organizations just as I do. And this is a great tool and a great resource. And for those that you want to know more, of course, reach out to Polly and Mike. I'm going to put their links in here. I'm connected with them as well. We're co-collaborating. So I would love to, help bring this to you and to your organization with them if you guys are wanting to learn more. I always like to have our guests share just a kind of last thought or action or final thoughts, quite honestly, as we've covered a lot of ground. And I'll come to you, Polly, first, and then Mike. But just as a kind of we've shared some things, what would you just want folks to just really remember, take away, if it's an action, just a thought, something that they should consider leaving this podcast today, Polly? So I'll come to you first, then Mike.
The action for me is try the friction calculator. It takes less than 2 minutes, and the results will lightly surprise you in a bad way. But better informed than rudely surprised.
Yeah, so let's be aware. If we're aware, then we can do something about the problem. If we're unaware, we're sunk. So I'll put a link to the friction calculator in our notes in here as well, so you guys can go check it out. I've done it. It's a great tool. Mike, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's to top that. What else? I said it before and I'll say it again. Why wouldn't you? Have a look at the website. There is a sample report there. Have a look at the kind of information that you can get. for the amount of cost and the amount of time and effort involved. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Try it. It will surprise you.
Absolutely.
We've removed an awful lot of friction points, I think, for most people. So it really shouldn't be and if it's a worry, try us in a department or a part of your organization.
Yeah.
And then if you like what you see, roll it out organization-wide.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Polly, Mike, I want to thank you so much for being on the Business Roundtable podcast. A true pleasure having you here.
Thanks, David. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. Of course, we love when you guys like and subscribe and follow along. If you have comments for Mike or Polly, you're welcome to leave them here on our podcast, wherever the platform you are listening on, Spotify, Amazon, whatever the case might be, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Please come back. Join us again on our next episode. Until then, be well. Thanks for listening. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.